In my quiet time today, I was reading Psalm 55, and I figured you might connect to it if you've ever been betrayed by a friend. Here's what the psalmist wrote, David. He said, "Listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my plea. Hear me and answer me. My thoughts trouble me, and I'm distraught because of what my enemy is saying, because of the threats of the wicked. For they bring down suffering on me and assail me in their danger." Now, it's probably the context of this is when David's son, Absalom, had led a rebellion and tried to kick David off of the throne. David goes on later and he says in verse 6, "Oh, that I had the wings of a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert. I would hurry to my place of shelter, far from the tempest and storm." I wonder if you can relate to that. You know, when you're in trouble and when you've got just people coming at you from all sides, you probably a lot of times just want to flee, just get away from it all. And this is what David is articulating in this psalm. But what's interesting is as we read on a little bit later, we get a little more information. He says in verse 12, "If an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. If a foe were rising against me, I could hide. But it's you," and we're going to talk about who it is in just a second, "a man like myself, my companion, my close friend," one of David's close friends, "with whom I enjoyed such sweet fellowship at the house of God as we walked about among the worshipers." Now, if you know anything about the story of David, you'll know that probably who he's talking about is depicted here in 2 Samuel 15 because it says, after Absalom, David's son, started the rebellion, in verse 30, it says David was continuing on up the Mount of Olives. He was weeping as he went. His head was covered and he was barefoot. So who knows, maybe this was the same day he wrote Psalm 55. And it says, all the people with him covered their heads too, and they're weeping with him as they went. And David had been told, here's what had happened. Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. Now, Ahithophel, and say that with me, that's a tough one. He was one of David's closest cabinet members, one of his counselors, and he stabbed David in the back. He conspired with David's son, Absalom. He left David and he went over to Absalom. And this is probably what David was talking about. This is the friend that betrayed him. Can you relate to that? Back to Psalm 55, he says, "My companion attacks his friends. He violates his covenant." Surely he had a covenant as a cabinet member. "His talk is smooth as butter, yet war is in his heart. His words are more soothing than oil, yet they are drawn swords." Now today, this is more than just a history lesson for you. Really, I want you to see how David ends the psalm. Here's what he says in verse 22 at the end of the psalm. He says, "Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken." This is what I love about David, that even though he had a lot of troubles in this life, I mean, I'm sure you can relate, and he had his son and one of his closest advisors and friends betray him. At the end of the day, at the end of the song, he says, "Cast your cares on the Lord." And here's something that David learned over and over and over and over again in his life: God will sustain him. If that's a lesson you need to learn today, receive that, even if a friend betrays. Cast your cares on the Lord, because God will sustain you.